Mr. Speaker, last week, Canada lost the only sovereign that most of us have ever known. It's important to take these moments here in Parliament and across the country to recognize the service and the leadership that she offered us.
When someone lives until 96, this should not have come as a surprise. And yet, her sudden absence has struck us all palpably and profoundly. Her Majesty was everywhere, on coins, her portrait hanging in Parliament and post offices, her televised Christmas address, a cozy ritual in homes from coast to coast to coast. The Queen meant so much to so many of us, and she exuded a humility and compassion that provided comfort to all. I was extraordinarily fortunate to have known Her Majesty throughout my life. The first time I met her was in 1977, when I was just a little boy. When I would meet with her as Prime Minister almost 4 decades later, in 2015, I joked that the last times we had met, she had been taller than me. She responded with a quip about my making her feel old. Her sense of humor was one of her many great qualities, and one of the many reasons why she was one of my favorite people in the world. She embraced her role as Queen of Canada, our Queen, our head of state. Her conversations with me were always candid. We talked about anything and everything. She gave her best advice on a range of issues. She was always curious, engaged, and thoughtful. Canadians can be forever grateful for her counsel. In a way, everybody knew her. Canadians feel like they've lost a family member who grew up alongside us. See, she was only 9 years old when she carried out what was perhaps her first official duty for Canada, appearing on a postage stamp. That was in 1935. Her Majesty was with us for important birthdays, like in 1967, when she cut Canada's centennial cake on Parliament Hill. Our country came of age under her reign. It was Her Majesty who proclaimed and signed the Constitution Act of 1982 and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. These pillars of our democracy help uphold the stability of our country and keep us free. Sa Majesté.
Her Majesty felt at home in Canada. She came to Canada more often than to any other country. And as she said just a few years ago, whether it be attending a chariot race at the Calgary Stampede or watching athletes at the Olympic Games in Montreal, whether that be listening to an Inuit welcoming song in Nunavut or to the sound of bagpipes in Nova Scotia, I have always felt not only welcome in Canada, but also at home in Canada. The Queen had a profound appreciation for our culture. In 1964, she said that she was happy to know that there existed in our Commonwealth a place where it was expected of her that she would speak officially in French. It's a language that she loved a lot and that she spoke impeccably well.
Mr. Speaker, many words have been used to describe the qualities that mark the legacy of Her Majesty. Words like duty, service, devotion, stability. Each of these words mark a slightly different aspect of what she gave to us. When we think of duty, we reflect on how the Queen embodied the crown above all else, of how her final public act was a constitutional one as she invited the United Kingdom's new Prime Minister to form government. And her last public statement was one offering condolences to survivors and the loved ones of the victims in Saskatchewan. When we think of service, we remember how in 1945, as Princess Elizabeth, she donned a uniform and joined the Allied efforts, including those of more than 1 million Canadians, during World War II.
When we think of her devotion, we think of the images and the stories of Her Majesty as a wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. We think of her devoted family, who is mourning with grace and love for her. But when we think of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, we think especially of the stability that she brought us. Her 70-year reign is unequaled. Last June, we celebrated the first ever Platinum Jubilee of a Canadian sovereign. Throughout her reign, Canada knew extraordinary peace and prosperity.
Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent said when he addressed this House after the death of King George, her father, in 1952, we have in our Commonwealth nations a system of government as free as any on earth. Mr. Speaker, today the world is in a tough place. We're all reeling from an unprecedented global pandemic. Putin's brutal and unjustifiable war is threatening global stability. Around the globe, democratic institutions are being challenged. But Canadians can rightly be proud of living in one of the strongest democracies in the world. Our institutions are healthy, our debates are robust, and we have an enviable stability and resilience despite, or perhaps because of, Canadians' vast diversity of beliefs, backgrounds, and perspectives. It is this very strength and stability, represented by the Crown and embodied by the Queen, that Canadians have always benefited from. And we, as parliamentarians and Canadians, dedicate ourselves each and every day to those democratic principles. Each of us, sitting here in this House, has chosen to serve our communities and our country. We also do so in the knowledge that our challenges of our time in public office are time limited. But for Her Majesty, public service was her entire life, right up until the very end. She had an unflinching, enduring commitment to service, to building a better world and a better future. All of us here know that service requires sacrifices. The Queen did so with grace. Her selflessness and dedication is a model to remind us of the weight and the importance of every day we sit in this House and to inspire us as we go forward. In our constitutional monarchy, the Crown's function in our government is to be a bedrock for our Constitution and to transcend the daily political debates. Our new King, King Charles III, demonstrated his commitment to the larger sweep of history with his most recent tour that included a focus on the generational work necessary to achieve reconciliation and fight climate change. The stability of our overarching democratic institutions gives Canadians assurance and peace of mind, like caring for, so we can all focus on the issues that matter the most, like taking care of people, of our economy, of our communities, and of our planet.
Mr. Speaker, before concluding, I wish to offer on behalf of all Canadians my sincere condolences to the royal family. This weekend, I will be traveling to London, with former prime ministers and governors general to attend the state funeral of Her Majesty, which will take place on Monday. That same day, to mark her passage, Canada will observe a national day of mourning and will organize a commemorative ceremony. I hope that next Monday, Canadians from coast to coast to coast will take a few moments to think about the incredible heritage that Her Majesty has left us and to think about what she represented best.
Mr. Speaker, Queen Elizabeth served her duties and her people's up until the end, there for all of us until her final moments. We shall all miss her immensely, but I know, we all know, that our new sovereign, His Majesty King Charles III, will uphold these very values that we speak to today and continue her legacy. Long live the King.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Today, the House of Commons is reflecting upon the exceptional life of Her Majesty Elizabeth II, Canada's Queen, our Queen, for roughly 70 years. She was our head of state, but also a servant of the Canadian people. She was a model for all those who work for the public service.
Us that for all the pomp and circumstance, the real work of governing is not glamorous. It often requires putting aside egos, keeping our heads down, and keeping on with the job. Her humility reminded us that government is not about us. It is about those we serve. We are indeed servants and not masters. The Queen had a special place in our hearts, and we had a special place in hers. She spent a more official time here in Canada than in any other country save the United Kingdom. She first visited Canada as Princess Elizabeth in 1951. It was on that trip that she said, and I quote, "From the moment when I first set foot on Canadian soil, the feeling of strangeness went, for I knew myself to be among not only friends, but amongst fellow countrymen." She would visit Canada over 20 times as Queen, and she was present at so many of our most important occasions. The opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in '59, the Centennial Expo in '67, the '76 Summer Olympics, and the patriation of our Constitution in 1982. As we reflect on Her late Majesty's life and her service, we reflect also on the enduring nature of the institution over which she was the crown. On her visit to Canada in 1951, then Princess Elizabeth planted an oak sapling in Vancouver. 71 years later, that sapling has grown into a mighty and stately oak whose canopy provides relief from the sun, or, it being Vancouver, perhaps more likely shelter from the rain. The oak tree has long been a royal symbol. It is a symbol of the British Constitution, whose forms we inherited and whose conventions we follow in this House. In Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, he wrote, "The Constitution was a spreading oak tree, under whose protective shade the British could peacefully and securely enjoy life, as is only possible for those who live under ordered liberty." In Burke's day, the Crown was already a largely symbolic institution. The Civil War had made Parliament supreme more than a century earlier. The conventions of cabinet were established and similar to what they are now today. But there were voices who thought that it was time to set aside the monarchy. Burke understood, however, that the key to stability, civil peace, and freedom was not to scrap the crown, but to keep it free from day-to-day politics. When each of us entered this place, this Parliament of ours, we entered a place rooted in a historic compromise between Crown and Commoner, a compromise that was forged over centuries through bloody conflict, but also through peaceful evolution. The authority of the Crown may, in a sense, be fictional, but it is also functional. You see, the separation of symbolic authority from political power allows partisan politics to be contested fearlessly without threatening the enduring constitutional order. Parties and politicians come and go, the Crown endures. The division of duties, or the org chart, as we might say in workplace lingo, is simple. The Crown preserves parliamentary democracy and the commoners practice it, as we do here in this place. And where does all this come from? Well, it's at least as old as the Magna Carta itself. In 1215, the barons gathered in the fields of Runnymede outside London to confront the king. They were angry at being overtaxed to fund royal adventurism overseas and frustrated by arbitrary excesses of royal power at home. And they were determined to rein in the Crown's authority. The barons forced King John to sign the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, which spelled out the rights and freedoms that the Crown must honor. This was and is liberty under the law. Over the next 800 years, those liberties would be gradually extended, improved upon, and given to citizens not only of the United Kingdom, but all of those who inherited British-style parliamentary democracy. Now, though this system is 800 years old, it is only one generation deep. If one generation throws it away, all may lose it forever. And that is why the work of Her Majesty in preserving that liberty and that system is such a treasured gift to us all and to many more yet to come. As Burke put it, it is a partnership between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born. We are the living generation, and we have a duty to pass on to our children what Diefenbaker called the heritage of freedom we inherited from our ancestors. This is an inheritance of all Canadians, not just those of British lineage. I myself am not of British descent, but I recognize this tradition and these liberties are my own, just as did our first French-Canadian Prime Minister, the great Wilfrid Laurier, did more than a century ago.
During a visit to France as a Prime Minister in 1897, Laurier noted on behalf of all French Canadians that there was loyalty to England and France by saying that we are loyal to our great nation that gave birth to us and also to those who gave us freedom.
To a French audience, that our glory in Canada is that we are faithful to the great nation which gave us life and faithful to the great nation which gave us liberty. And when the Queen spoke at the patriation of our Constitution in 1982, at a ceremony not far from where I stand and where all of you sit today, she said, "The genius of Canadian federalism lies in our consistent ability to overcome differences through reason and compromise. That ability is reflected in the willingness of ordinary people of French-speaking and English-speaking Canada and of all regions to respect each other's rights and to create the conditions together under which all may prosper in freedom." Dans son premier discours,
in his first official speech as king, the King Charles III stated that he was raised in the greatest respect for the precious traditions of liberty and responsibility of our unique history and of our parliamentary government system. Therefore, I would like to congratulate the new king for his responsibilities, and I look forward to serving the Canadian people here in Canada as he does the same thing.
It is with a heavy heart, but heartfelt thanks, and with confidence in the future that I say, Godspeed, Queen Elizabeth II, God save the King, and God bless Canada. Thank you.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Ballet-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me first to express quite simply the condolences of the Bloc Québécois, of its employees as well, to anyone who is grieving after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. It's not something we do as nationalists and sovereignists without great reflection amongst ourselves. Everyone has their own sensibilities, and this means that we need to pay particular attention to history. The history between the Crown and the Quebec nation is both thorny and cruel. History separates us, but respect must come first, and we have to distinguish institutions from the people, politics from sincere sadness. So it's without any other thoughts that we would like to express our deepest condolences to the people of England. And after the expressions of sympathies here of the leaders in this House, and after the minute of silence, the members of the Bloc Québécois will withdraw from this place without any further participation. And then, Mr. Speaker, I would invite us all to think and reflect. In the meantime, our thoughts go to those who are grieving, the loss of someone who has been very important to us for the past 3 decades. Thank you.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I want to join with my colleagues in marking the tragic loss of life in Saskatchewan on the James Smith Cree Nation and in the town of Weldon. The sorrow and pain for the families who lost their loved ones to such unspeakable violence is beyond our understanding. We hold these families close in our hearts. Today, I want to join in marking the passing of Queen Elizabeth II and extend my condolences to the family. At the age of 21, she made the promise she would spend her whole life, whether it be long or short, fulfilling her duty. And for more than 70 years, she kept this promise. 2 days before she died, she met with the incoming British Prime Minister and invited her to form a government, ensuring that she fulfilled this final constitutional duty. Aujourd'hui, je souhaite...
Today, I would like to commemorate the death of Queen Elizabeth II and present my condolences to her family. At the age of 21 years of age, she made the promise that she would spend her entire life, whether it was long or short, to accomplishing her duty. And for more than 70 years, she kept that promise. 2 days before she died, she met the new British Prime Minister and invited her to form a government, thus fulfilling her last constitutional duty.
Second, led a remarkable life, one marked by history. Amid tremendous change, she was a figure of stability, providing a constant symbol to many. 96 years is a long time for anyone to be alive. She was born before mass communication and media shrunk the distances between nations, before television, and long before the internet brought us limitless access to information. Her life was marked by war. In World War II, as her parents vowed to stay in London while it was bombed, she and her sister were moved to Windsor for safety. As children in war, the Queen and her sister took to the airwaves in a radio broadcast for other children who were also experiencing the worry and fear of bombing attacks and parents gone to fight. Throughout her life, Queen Elizabeth used her platform to offer encouragement in difficult times. Most recently, during the pandemic, She reminded us that we would get through the challenge and the pain of not being able to see loved ones. She asked us to greet the tough times with optimism and hope by pulling together and doing what was needed to be done. She said, we should take comfort while we may have still more to endure. Better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. For many, her passing marks the end of an era. She is the only queen we have ever known.
For many people, her death marks the end of an epoch. She was the only queen that they knew. She loved Canada a lot, and I heard many stories of people who were very touched by meeting her.
Her death, I've heard many Canadians talk about meeting her. She came to Canada often, as has been remarked, showing her affection for this country. Many who have met the Queen, sometimes for the briefest of moments, feel that she took the time to listen to them, that she was interested in their lives and sincere in her appreciation for the chance to meet them. This was her gift, to make you feel seen in a crowd of thousands, to invest her whole attention in every encounter, even when it was one of many. Je tiens également.
I would also like to take a few moments to congratulate the King Charles III, who is taking over the legacy of his mother. He must grieve, this deep loss as the entire world watches and also meeting their standards. I hope that he will rise to this challenge of reconciliation that the leaders of the First Nations have given him with respect to reconciliation.
A few moments to congratulate King Charles III as he takes on the legacy of his mother. He must mourn this most profound loss before the eyes of the world, while ensuring that he lives up to her example of duty above all else. I hope that he will meet the challenge of reconciliation that has been laid out by First Nations leaders and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One of the calls to action is for the issuing of a royal proclamation of reconciliation. I hope that when the Prime Minister has his first meeting with the new king, he will remind him of this outstanding call to action and the power that King Charles has to further the goal of reconciliation. There is also much work to repair the relationship of the Crown with many people around the world who experienced the pain as a result of colonialization. Loss of language and culture, violence and war are the legacies of a colonial past. I believe the new king has an opportunity and a responsibility to do what he can to right the wrongs of the past. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to again extend my deep condolences to the family of Queen Elizabeth II. More than a monarch, she was a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. So it is for her family that we must feel the deepest sympathy. They've lost a pillar of strength, a reminder of their own history, and an example of a life well lived.
I would like to extend once again my condolences to the family of Queen Elizabeth II. More than a queen, she was a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. So it is for her family that we must feel the deepest sympathy. They have lost a pillar of strength, a reminder of their own history, and an example of a life well lived. Thank you.